Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the final Coil of Bahamut Turn 4, also known as Turn 13. This is the last major encounter you'll face and an earth-shattering conclusion to an epic story arc. While the difficulty of this fight may flatten your motivation or cause your temper to flare up, once you get through the blood and pain you'll be able to breathe and walk free. My name is Ms. Tech and I'll be your raid guide. This is a 4-phase encounter with a hard enrage timer of 14 minutes. Luckily, many of the mechanics overlap phases, making this one of the easiest final boss encounters in terms of the number of things you have to learn. The difficulty of this fight rests purely in just how hard everything hits. High player health pools and magic defense can make the world of a difference here, so dress appropriately. It is also recommended to use Melee Limit Break 1 as soon as it's available in the first or second phase, to have Limit Break 3 available at the end of the add phase. Obviously, this will change with increased gear levels. Positioning of the boss is dependent on your raid group's preference, and is in part affected by the spawn of the adds in phase 2. We'll get into more details soon. In phase 1, healers and tanks will first notice Flare Breath. This is a high damage frontal cleave on Bahamut's primary target. As such, he should never be turned to face the raid. Each Flare Breath hits for about 3k and will happen throughout the encounter. The first main mechanic you'll see is MEGAFLARE. This attack is a 3-part mechanic combo that needs to be handled all at the same time. To break it down simply, 3 or 4 players will be targeted by this ground AoE. Standing in this will deal high damage and should be avoided. 3 to 4 players will also be targeted by an unavoidable AoE blast that can splash damage on anyone nearby. And lastly, 2 to 4 players will be marked up by these targets, signifying that they will be blasted by a massive hit whose damage must be shared with any other marked players. Getting hit by this blast without the beam, or not sharing the blast with the others, will kill you. To handle this, these marked players will group up on a pre-assigned spot, shown here by waymark A behind Bahamut's bum. Everyone else should stay away. To handle all of these at once is quite simple. Players should spread out while the MEGAFLARE cast is going out. This will ensure you're not doubling up on the unavoidable hit damage, and you're not dropping any poop on the stack up spot. The marked players will run forward into the stack up spot to share their damage. Once that damage has gone out, healers do their thing, and everyone else repositions. MEGAFLARE will happen throughout the entire fight, and getting used to the movement is imperative to success. The next major ability will be Flatten. This is a high damage tank crunch that is immediately followed by 3 consecutive flare breaths in the first phase. An appropriate cooldown rotation is a must. The number of these Flatten and flare combos is dependent on how quickly you can push through the phase. Remember, high damage is sometimes the greatest mitigation. If necessary, you can utilize a tank swap to squeeze in a few extra cooldowns. Up next, we have Earthshaker. This ability will target 2 players with these 2 marks. After a few seconds, Bahamut will cast 3 Earthshakers, damaging anyone in a line between him and the marked player, and causing them to drop fiery sludge puddles. These sludge puddles will damage and place a heavy on the player if they languish. As such, players need to move as soon as Bahamut rears up to cast the next Earthshaker, or earlier. To avoid clipping the raid with this damage and minimizing the effect these puddles have on raid movement, players will drop off each puddle in a neat little pattern at the front of the arena. This positioning is especially important in the last phase, so be sure to get your practice in early. Let's do a quick recap. We pull into our first flare breath into MEGAFLARE. Spread out, stack in, heal. Another flare breath and Bahamut will begin to cast Flatten, followed immediately by 3 flare breaths. Cooldowns as necessary. Next is Earthshaker. Drop these puddles off and don't get stuck. These mechanics will repeat until 76%. At 76%, Bahamut will cast GIGAFLARE. This is a high damage raid-wide AoE blast. Stack, shield, heal, and debuff through it. At the very start of phase 2, Bahamut will spawn a Shadow of Mericidia in the north. This is the first of 3 adds in this phase. Should any of these adds get too close to Bahamut, they will buff each other, resulting in far too much damage to deal with. This is where the positioning for Bahamut comes into play. We tank Bahamut in the south to avoid having to move him for any of the add spawns. If you're tanking him anywhere else, note that you will probably have to move before the add spawn to avoid this buff. If the add isn't destroyed fast enough, it will breathe a line of 3 fire puddles towards someone, limiting movement. As such, damage dealers should switch onto this add as soon as possible. Directly after GIGAFLARE, and at the same time the add spawns, Bahamut will cast Flare Star. This will cause a number of blue orbs to spawn at intervals before the next MEGAFLARE. These orbs tether to random players and slowly move towards them at first before quickly slamming into them. When a player player is hit by an orb, they receive a debuff called Suffocated Will that will do damage upon application based on how many stacks that player already has. The average player cannot and should not take more than 2 of these orb debuffs. To deal with these balls, communication is key. As soon as they spawn, players need to quickly figure out how many balls are about to hit how many players and then intercept accordingly. Flatten, Flare Breath, and MEGAFLARE continue here along with a few key differences. Flatten will only be followed by a single flare, but cooldowns are still necessary. During MEGAFLARE, a pillar will spawn on a random player that will detonate seconds later, debuffing the raid and probably resulting in a wipe. To avoid this, one player must stand in the pillar to personally soak the damage and keep the pillar from detonating. After the pillar explodes, Bahamut will cast Rage of Bahamut, dealing damage to players based on how many of the Suffocated Will stacks they have. Stack in for easy shields and heals. After Rage, the next ad will spawn in the southwest and the mechanics will repeat. The third ad spawns in the southeast. Remember to pull these ads away from Bahamut, regardless of where you're tanking him, and burn them down immediately. Let's do another recap and look at the rotation of mechanics in this phase. Coming out of GIGAFLARE, Bahamut will summon the first ad and cast Flare Star. Players will intercept this first set of balls while destroying the ad. During this time, healers and tanks need to keep an eye out for Flare Breaths. The next set of balls spawn, followed shortly by a Flatten and Flare combo. Another set of balls into MEGAFLARE with a pillar leads us finally into Rage of Bahamut. Keep a close eye on anyone vulnerable and heal them up. These mechanics will repeat until 52%. At this point, Bahamut will cast another GIGAFLARE before flying away. This marks the start of phase 3, where we'll deal with ads and our favorite mechanic, dive bombs. Dive bombs work in a fairly simple manner, but require quick positioning to avoid correctly. These dive bombs also rely on personal player positioning, so make sure that every member of your group understands how they work. There are 3 dive bomb sets in total, the first 2 requiring you to dodge both Bahamut and Photonya's dive bombs. Let's take a closer look. As soon as Bahamut runs away, the group will stack in the very center of the room. Bahamut will spawn somewhere on the outer ring and mark up a player with this red circle. Since everyone is stacked in the center, we know his dive will be directly through the center of the room in the direction that he's facing. A few seconds later, Twin will also spawn somewhere around the outer ring and mark up her own player with the usual green dive bomb marker. Again, since we're all in the middle, we know that she will dissect the arena at whatever angle from Bahamut she's facing. Now, adding both of these affected areas together, you'll get a few safe zones around the platform. As soon as this green marker is out, the entire raid needs to disperse to the appropriate safe zones, dodging both dragons. Directly after dive bombs, you need to expect MEGAFLARE. This means that players need ample room to spread out immediately after dive bombs. To facilitate this, we split the raid into 2 groups, one that will go to the safe zones to the left of Bahamut's dive, and one that will go to the right. The easiest way is to face Bahamut, and get ready to move left or right. Once the green comes out and you start moving, find Twin using your camera and then adjust your trajectory to end up in a safe spot. Anticipating movement will allow you to quickly adjust. Pop sprint if necessary. Once you're clear of each dive, spread away from your friends in anticipation for MEGAFLARE. The 2 marked players will stack in the very center of the room to soak that damage while everyone else stays away. After MEGAFLARE, the first set of ads will spawn. Everything in this phase, including ad spawns and dive bombs, is timed. Staying on top of each ad set and getting ready for dive bombs is imperative to surviving this phase and pushing into the last phase cleanly. The first 2 ads to spawn are the Blood and Pain of Mericidia. Each tank will pick these up. To avoid interaction with the next set of ads, the Pain should be pulled to the west of the room, while the DPS focuses down the Blood. The Blood will have a buff that nullifies either magic or physical damage that can swap to the other, so make sure you have the appropriate damage dealers on each ad. Once the Blood is down, switch to the Pain. The Pain has a hard-hitting cleave and tail swipe, so avoid these as necessary. The next set of ads are 3 Gusts. If they get too close, Gusts can be absorbed by the Pain, causing him to heal and buffing him up. We let these swarm to the healers in the center of the room so that the Blood tank can pick them up easily. Finish off the Pain and then AoE down the Gusts. The next 2 ads to spawn are 2 Sins. These do a fair amount of damage on their primary target but do not cleave. The 2 tanks will each pick one up and stack them in the middle. 20 seconds after the Sins spawn, they will cast Evil Eye in a cone on a random target. The amount of damage this does is proportional to the Sins' health at the time. To avoid death, high DPS is required on both of these ads. Moments after, the second second dive bomb set will begin. This is identical to the first. Be in your predetermined stack spot, find Bahamut, wait for green, run to your side while finding Twin, and reposition to the closest safe spot. Spread for MEGAFLARE, stack in if you need, and get ready for the next set of adds. Twin is the first to spawn in the center. She should be picked up immediately and dragged to the south side of the room. This tank will handle Twin and the GUSTS, while the other tank handles the rest. Twin will do the ever-familiar plummet and death sentences, so cool down through these appropriately. All the previous adds you saw will spawn here, and balancing damage to destroy each one in time, while at the same time destroying Twin, is what makes this part of the phase difficult. The blood will spawn moments after Twin. GUSTS will come out roughly after the first death sentence. These will spawn directly on top of Twin if positioned in the south, allowing this tank to easily pick them up. Next is a Sin. We tank all of these adds on top of Twin, allowing us to passively cleave damage onto her. Once the pain is out, the tank will pull it to the outer edge of the arena, away from any possible GUSTS that may still be up. To keep up with the next dive bomb, you should see no more than 2 death sentences, so cool down appropriately. When Twin dies, she will drop a massive Neuralink that we will use to survive Bahamut's ultimate attack at the end of the ad phase. As such, it is imperative that she dies before that time, or you will wipe. Destroy any remaining GUSTS and burn down the pain as much as possible. Bahamut will reappear for his final dive bomb. Since Twin has been killed, you only have to deal with a single dive bomb through the center. Run left or right, spread apart, soak MEGAFLARE. Kill off that last ad and huddle in the Neuralink. Use tank limit break 3 to survive the damage of TerraFlare. This leads us into the fourth and final phase. This phase is very similar to the first phase with a few key differences. The first is Morn. This is a heavy-hitting, butthole-puckering attack on Bahamut's primary target and is split with the purses nearest to them. Each time Morn is cast, Bahamut will add an extra hit of it. This means that the first cast will have 1 extra hit, the second will have 2 extra, and so on. You will see 5 Morns before Bahamut enrages, each one getting deadlier and deadlier. To deal with this, tanks and healers will utilize a specific set of cooldowns, including taking Morn solo with immunities, and the use of external cooldowns to their full potential. After the first Morn, the raid will reposition and get ready for the first MEGAFLARE. MEGAFLAREs in this phase have the potential to spawn 2 pillars that must be soaked. To deal with this, be as aggressive with these as possible. Don't assume someone else will do it. The damage of a few people taking the same pillar greatly outweighs wiping at this point because no one stood in it. You may also find it easier to stack in the center of the room for MEGAFLARE in this phase, allowing the raids the room they need to handle mechanics. The last new mechanic in this phase is Tempest Wing and its resultant twister. 2 tethers will spawn during each MEGAFLARE and Earthshaker. After each mechanic is complete, a twister will spawn on the tethered player, doing high damage and knocking back any nearby players. To deal with these, we have the tanks grab these tethers off of anyone that they spawn and move them away from the group. After MEGAFLARE and tethers, we have Earthshaker and tethers. Each Earthshaker puddle will now last much longer, forcing players to layer their puddles for each Earthshaker in appropriate areas. For the tethers during Earthshakers, some groups will not have their main tank grab a tether, since a flare breath happens directly after the twister. Instead, they have one of their Earthshaker targets handle their Tempest Wing twister away from the group after dropping their puddles. The danger here lies in the possibility of that DPS failing at puddles and then dying to the damage of the twister. In our group, we chose both tanks to take both tethers here, as we find it much easier for our healers to only have to anticipate and focus heal the predictable damage on the tanks. With appropriate heal and shield timing, the twister and the consecutive flare damage is easy to handle. Naturally, choose whichever method you are most comfortable with. After this, we have another Morn. We let the off-tank solo this one with an immunity. Another MEGAFLARE with tethers followed by another Earthshaker with tethers. Here, Bahamut casts GIGAFLARE. Stack up on his butt for heals, cooldown, and debuff through this. The mechanics here will repeat until the boss is down or you hit the enrage. Remember that each Morn gets spicier and spicier, so an appropriate cooldown rotation is a must. Our tanks use cooldowns for the first and third Morns, and immunities for the second and fourth, saving all possible cooldowns and any remaining immunities for the fifth, if you reach that point. You will see at most 5 Morns before Bahamut casts his final enrage. As such, damage is incredibly important in every single phase. Using poison pots on each phase is an excellent way to help push you over that damage threshold, so don't skimp out. And there you have it. Let those nerd screams out because you've just won the war. Congratulations on your sexy new loot. If you have any questions or comments on how we personally handled some of the specifics, please let me know. As always, thanks for watching. It's been a pleasure.